Hello, they're back.
Whoa.
Sorry about that, we had audio issues. But now introducing Ash and Shane with voices.
Yay! Let's do that again. Well, that was interesting to hear about your weekend.
That was such a really great,
You
fascinating
never-
story that we were telling. Oh, it's the best story I think.
Yeah,
anyone
wow,
ever
everyone
told.
missed out. What are we doing today?
We were talking about finishes and restoration.
Finishes. We'll do a summary of the last minute. I wasn't here a week ago. Yes, I was.
Just
So,
before you go, anyone that is watching, can we just get a
Confirmation you can hear us.
The audio is working.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd
Please
be
let
great.
us know.
I just got from Robbie, no audio, just a solid buzz, as well as from Janet Joseph, who originally said no audio.
oh, okay.
So if someone could just give us a thumbs up to say that we've got audio, that'd be swell.
Yeah.
Man, we were on such a good kick there.
Yeah, we were just
Really
chatting
nice.
away. We can start again, though. I think that's
Yeah,
fine.
if you guys have got that on tap.
Yeah. So we should just.
I
Are
have a peek.
you going to pop off?
So there's no reply, so perhaps they can't hear me.
Yeah.
They can't hear?
Maybe
Okay.
I should write.
I could write. Yeah, get a piece of paper.
In here.
Yeah, you're
Ah,
beauty.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you, Robbie.
Hello.
Robbie, by the way, I think is also doing a live art performance today. So
Yeah,
that out.
check Robbie
cool.
out.
Yeah.
He's- I don't know Robbie, but I'm a big fan of his groovy, wacky furniture that he stands on and does all this cool art with. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Does
I
he have
have
an
one of
art
his
name? Just Robbie
Does
Kimmel.
he have an art name? Like stage name?
Seal. Robbie Kimmel.
Robbie Seal.
Okay.
Anyway,
What
so
are we doing?
today we're talking about furniture finishing and furniture restoration.
Yeah, it's a follow-on from 2 weeks ago. We were also here. Shane's a real whiz in finishes. He's taught me a lot the past year. That's more or less what we're
What we
speaking
were
about.
talking about. We were talking as well about how finishes can be. I use the word mystique. They can be kind of intimidating and they can be kind of tricky. And one of the reasons for that is that people don't know a lot about them. They're both art and science to a certain degree. They require knowing what you're doing with these various chemicals and stuff, but they also involve a lot of practice. And the trade itself in finishing can also feel really secretive, like a lot of the information is not put out there. So
Right.
I find it really fascinating to dig into that and figure it out, and I get really excited about sharing what I find.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that I want to talk about today.
There's another thing you were about to touch on.
Oh, was there?
Was that your boss at the moment says you can apply a French polish or teach
Yeah.
it very quickly for an hour?
Yeah, we were talking about French polishing and why it's such an art to a certain degree, or why there's such a long time to train in it. And part of that is with French polishing, it's art and science in that sense. You can, my boss in Chatswood says, you can teach someone how to French polish in an hour, but it can take years to actually get the practice enough, because it's a skill like any other, to be able to do it to the highest degree.
And the highest
but you can
degree is
do
like
it.
dramatically, you will it's quite
Oh yeah,
dramatic difference.
it's the piano finish. Like
What-
if you go into
yeah.
a piano shop and you look at that old finish, it's just like
Glass, yeah.
it's just like glass.
What's that Queensland guy that has a piece of furniture in the Queen's house or something?
David Boucher.
Is he Queenslander?
He's on
Or
the coast
Tasmania.
somewhere between here and there.
But look at his pieces, like design-wise, they're a bit weird, aren't they? But the finish
The
is
finish on that, he uses not shellac for those. He uses nitrocellulose, which is spraying lacquer.
Is that cheating?
I don't think it's cheating.
It's not.
No, but it's a different
I
thing.
thought it was shellac, and that's why he had a good score.
No, he uses a lacquer. He uses a spray lacquer.
But look him up. If everyone's at home on their computers, you may as well, and then it'll get you interested. David what?
David Boucher.
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 Yeah,
very,
cool.
very skilled Australian furniture maker.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to this because I'm sure to learn a lot.
Yeah.
Shane's taught me a lot. What are we going to do?
One of the things that we want to
That's
talk
me
about.
just leading the way. No, that'll do. Let's move on.
One of the things that I want to talk about specifically is working with old finishes like this one here. We've got a beautiful old cedar table, Australian made,
It's got all sorts of stuff going on.
and it looks very gross at the moment. And I think there's a little bit of a good pointing. I think there's a little bit of a thing about old furniture that the instinct or what people think they need to do, or the only thing that they think is the thing to do, is to sand it back or to strip it. And one of the things that I want to talk about specifically, because sanding it back and stripping it, I mean, you can do that. It's an option. Remove the whole complete surface off of it and then build up a new finish as if it's a new piece. It's doable. I think there are better options personally.
Yeah, it's hard work, yeah, sanding.
It's super hard work.
Yeah.
If you sanding it, you've got all this dust up in the air that you have to deal with. You also have to be extremely thorough. If you leave any bits where you left some, they'll show completely later on. You polish it up and you just see all these little specks of the old finish.
Yeah.
And stripping as well, it involves solvents and it can be quite gross and also really time consuming. And both of these things, in my opinion, also lose you the history of the piece. one of the nice things about this is it has age to it. It's got some marks in it that are from its life. And if we just kind of remove everything, you just lose half the joy of having an old piece, having something that has history to it. So
Totally. The amount of times that I would have, you see something like this and go, I'll just sand it out. And then you've got a sanded patch and you're like, oh, I've got to sand. Oh, I've just got to keep sanding. And then you're like, oh, I've got to sand all this. And just...
yeah, and then you end up just having to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is what I want to talk about today and how you can avoid that, and some other methods that you can use to deal with some of these issues that don't involve having to go whole hog on it and allow you to save some of that history on it. And I think this table is a really, really great example. One of the things that you can see with this, so first of all, it looks really gross, as you might be able to see. And there's a few things on this that are fairly common problems with furniture finishes as well. So, what are we looking at here?
Whatever you like.
You pointed here-ish.
Yep.
You've got kind of this grimy kind of stuff here all over the surface.
Looks
It's
a bit
kind
like
of
dirt.
a cloudy, it's almost dirt. It's preventing us from being able to see the timber. But if you look in close at some of the areas where that's not there, perhaps in this section, you can see that underneath that you've got a beautiful timber grain, and you've still actually got some of the potentially original finish on that piece underneath this layer of grime. And if possible, if we can remove that without removing the original finish, we'll have a lot less work, but we'll have that nice historic finish that was on it from when it was made. A couple of other things you've got on this is these kind of white spots, this big white patch over here, and you can see a couple of white rings like that. That's a very common problem that we're going to talk a little bit about. In this case, we're getting very lucky with it.
Okay.
But these white patches happen usually when a hot liquid gets on the surface. And what it'll do, we talked about furniture finishes last time. And when we talked about furniture finishes last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked about shellac. We talked about how we're basically taking a liquid, we're putting it on the surface, and it's hardening in some way.
Sure.
These white spots are places where steam has penetrated through that coating and has caused it to basically come off the surface. So these tiny little air bubbles underneath, between the wood and the coating, which, because of optical illusion, essentially makes it look white.
Wow. Cool.
So there's nothing there. It's not a stain. It's just a delaminated surface. And in some cases, you might want to reamalgamate it or something like that. In this case, we're lucky because that white is in the layer with all the grime on it. So if we can clear off that grimy layer, then we'll have a beautiful surface.
Have you done any investigating to confirm that? Or just if someone, there would be different forms of white patches?
Absolutely. And that's something that, unfortunately, one of the reasons I think why sanding or stripping becomes an easy option is because you can just do it. You can pick up your piece, you don't know what's on it, you don't know what's going on, but you can just strip it and sand it. The other options do involve a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of investigation. And on the higher ends, like really good restorers that I know, will be able to know, this is this and this is that, and be able to make decisions accordingly. But that's useful. So, this might have a certain type of grime coating on it, and we'll treat it in some way. But another piece might be a little bit different, and we treat it another way. That's one of the reasons why you might go to a professional for that kind of thing.
Sure.
But a couple of things that we can notice here. Luke, if you can get in on that. One of the other indications here that this finish is, so we've got that beautiful finish underneath here, and then we've got this kind of grimy layer that's delaminating where these white spots are.
Right.
And this grimy layer, I want to also note, it could just be buildup of grease and grime from years of being in a kitchen. You're cooking things on the stove, you get oils in the air, and they're going to land somewhere.
Sitting in the shed?
Yeah, this could also be the result of someone having used an oil or a polish on it at some point when it was getting grimy, because that's something that a lot of people will do. It's getting a little bit old, and so they'll wipe it down with an oil, or they'll use something like a cedar oil. And what that does is it actually puts a drying oil on top of the coating underneath. And that can go dark eventually, or can have problems. So that might be what's going on here as well. So I'm not a big fan of putting oils on things because they can end up looking like this. But if you get in close here, don't use my actual credit card on recorded television. Use my Opal card instead. We can actually scrape back some of this coating that's really weak.
Look at that.
And you can see underneath it that you've still got this lovely timber finish right underneath there. And so that's one option that you can do. If the coating on top or the grime layer is brittle, is crackling, and you can just get a little bit of a credit card or something and start to scrape it away, you don't have to use any sandpaper, you don't have to use any solvent. And it's going to actually very carefully only remove the bad bit, which is the nice thing about this. That coating underneath there is solid. It's in good shape. It's still bonding. So I can't get rid of that with this. This card, the nice thing about the card is it's not hard enough. It's not steel. It's not going to remove
And you
that.
do this prior to cleaning it, would you?
I would do some tests over the whole thing.
What is a test?
And if I can do this, yeah, I would do this first. And the only reason for that is just because this is quite a thick layer.
Yep.
And cleaning that away could take a really long time. Whereas this might be a faster option. And then once I've gotten rid of the bulk of it, I can come back later and clean off the last bit.
Sure.
Which that's going to actually come out really, really nicely.
Nice.
with
Are we going
this.
to do this?
Probably not the whole thing.
No?
No.
Okay.
Unless you want to.
Yeah, sure.
You
Do
wanna
you want to
give it
keep
a go?
going? I don't know,
Yeah.
it's too noisy. While you're chatting?
We'll swing it around.
Yep.
In that regard, though,
Yeah.
I want to talk about cleaning because you brought that up, which is really, really important. And I think we don't consider cleaning enough in this situation, and we jump straight to sanding or stripping when many times it's just a grime layer that's built up on the surface, and just cleaning off that grime layer can lead to a beautiful result. In terms of cleaners, though, that can be really intimidating, what people are going to use on their precious piece of furniture. And I think probably the easiest option is just to use a little bit of dish soap in water. In fact, Luke, can you get me some water? There are some old-time revivers, which are great. I mean, I've got old cedar polish here. That's that sort of thing, again, where that's putting an oil coating on the surface, so I wouldn't use that so much.
Yeah.
But if you've got just a little bit of no, that's disinfectant, a little bit of soap, and you put that in with some water, then you can clean it just like you would your dishes or anything else. And I know that there's a lot of concern with adding water to furniture.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to use a lot less than that. There's a lot of concern with using water with furniture, but as long as you dry it immediately and rinse it off, it should be fine. If you're concerned, if you've got a nice piece that's heritage, I wouldn't grab this and just wipe the whole thing down immediately, because if there is any issue, you've just wiped the whole thing. What I like to do is probably do just a test, so I'll get that
Right.
with a little cotton swab, and we might just do a test here. Probably not in the middle of the table, but I'm doing that anyway because we can, and just see what kind of result we get from that.
Right.
And these kind of cotton swabs are really nice for that. So with cleaning, it's not causing any problems, and it is getting rid of some of that grime, but it's taking, like I said, a lot longer than if you just scraped the bulk of it away, which is nice. And these little cotton swabs are great. If you you can buy them like this, but you can also really quickly just take some cotton and make them up yourself, just like that, by spinning it to be able to do a couple tests. And you can always check as well by looking at the cotton swab itself and seeing how much is actually coming off. As you can see, not a lot is coming off of this one.
Yeah. What if you used warm water? Would that make a difference?
Warm water would make a difference. And the other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to make up a more aggressive cleaner
Right.
or reviver. So I've got my soapy water, which is, I've got that much of it.
Yep.
I'm going to pour it in
It's
there.
pretty strong.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong concentration of soapy water, and it's still not quite
Yep.
getting rid of grease. And soap, of course, you've got your greases and grimes, which won't wash away in just water. You need to add soap or something else to make the water interact with them, which is why we're using soapy water to clean it. But if it's really caked on, we might need something more aggressive, like a solvent.
Yeah.
In which case, I will add a little bit of mineral terps to this, Now we talked last time about how shellac, which is probably what this coating is underneath here,
Yeah.
will dissolve in alcohol, right? So I don't want to clean this with alcohol because like methylated spirits sort of thing when I say alcohol or ethanol. If I was to do that, there's a risk that I'll pull off that original coating
Right.
as well, which I don't want to do.
Ah,
I
the stuff
just want to
underneath.
take
Sure.
the
Okay.
grime layer off.
Interesting.
Please interrupt me if I'm not making any sense.
So this terps is a more oily based thing,
Yeah.
which is what oils are. Shellac is an alcohol based thing, right? And then
Yeah.
they don't interact.
So
with
shellac
one another.
dissolves in alcohol. Methylated spirits is an alcohol.
Yeah.
Terps is more in the non-polar oily family.
Yeah.
I am going to add a tiny bit of methylated spirits to this,
Right.
which is dangerous.
Yeah, is that a bit naughty or?
Ooh, it's a bit tricky.
Yeah.
It'll be fine though, I think.
Okay.
Not a lot, because like I said, if I add a lot to it, it'll be a problem. And again, I'm going to just do a test
Right.
to see if that makes any difference, and that whether or not I'm accidentally going to eat through my old finish. So we're going to go back to where we were before,
Yeah.
right next to that, and we're going to try a little bit of that to see what we get. Obviously, again, doing this in the middle of the table,
It's not ideal.
and you can see there's a little bit more gray
Yeah.
on that swab, so we're just getting a little bit more of a result. Yeah, you can definitely see that's starting to pick something up.
Sure.
And because it's kind of that gray color, that's a good indication that it's the grease and grime.
Right. And so you could probably get this dirt off if you just
Yeah.
use the dishwashing liquid and kept going a bit mad on it, like really scrubbing.
Yeah.
But I guess just doing these mixes just makes it a bit easier.
But if we have a look at that spot there, this
Yeah,
is a
it's-
good tell of, so that alcohol is actually potentially removing. See how it's much paler? than
Ah,
around it?
right. So that's no good.
So it's just a matter of, in some cases, playing with your
Mm.
cleaners. Maybe just a pure terps will
Yeah,
be the way to go with it to try and
Sure.
get that grease and grime. But nice thing here, we know that it will scrape away, so we
Yeah.
can scrape the bulk of that away and then clean the rest.
Some of the
it.
scraping is a bit more fixed than others, yeah?
Yeah, and you'll find that because some areas will, particularly this white area,
Yeah.
where we already know that that's delaminated, it's not sticking anymore.
Yeah, it's
That's
coming
going to
off quite
scrape
easy.
away super easy.
Yeah,
But some of these other areas where it's really caked on,
Yep.
it's going to be a lot harder, and you might need to use more of a solvent in that case.
Yeah.
And in fact, we might find that if I were to say use a bit of terps,
Yep. No metho.
no metho, no detergent. Terps is good. It's a good degreaser.
Yep.
Can I borrow the scraper for
Of course
a
you
second?
can.
Let's say we're gonna go. Where do you want to go, Luke?
You put it and I'll the way you want it.
Let's go in here. It's kind of the middle of the table again. I ought to put some of that on there and
yeah.
let that solvent kind of interact.
This was just
with
the
it for a little bit.
terps.
And you can already see how
Yeah.
much that's doing. And then potentially even I could come back and try and
Do a follow up.
hit that with a scraper. And I can see that it's going through a little bit, but I will need a lot more.
Yeah.
But I might just be able to clean that away
Hmm.
with the terps and get a nice result that way. Yeah, Luke.
So is that indicating that it's potentially an oil finish, or that it is oil that's on top there?
Not necessarily. It indicates to me that it's oily in terms of its grease or its grime. The thing about that doesn't go on that bottle. The thing about an oil finish, like we talked about 2 weeks ago, is that your oils go on and then they harden, and when they do, they become insoluble. So you put your linseed oil on, it dries or cures rather than drying through an oxidization process, and it becomes insoluble again. So if there is an oil on it, putting terps or some sort of solvent isn't going to make it go away like with shellac, where you can use alcohol on it again in the future.
Yeah.
So what it tells me is that it's greasy or it's grimy because it's in that same oily category, and that I can continue to actually be quite aggressive with my terps as a solvent to try and clean that grease layer off without impacting the shellac layer underneath, which is really nice.
But
So-
if it's insoluble.
Insoluble, can't
Terps
be dissolved.
The terps isn't going to do anything to it. It's not going to.
It's not going to do anything.
So
to
you
it,
have
in
to
which
scrape
case
it
you
off
then
or-
have to use some sort of aggressive way to get it
Yeah.
off. Or there are some. I mean, but we're not going to go down that road. There's a lot of people in the conservation field who are perfecting gelling agents and cleaning agents to soften up the old grease or
Mm.
old linseed oil finishes, but probably not something you're going to do at home.
Right. Okay.
Um,
What's a quick way of doing this? Or should we not do that? Could we do the whole thing?
like the whole thing? Probably not today.
No.
And in fact, in my world, I'm actually fairly reticent to engage in the quickest way to do things.
Mm.
I often find that if somebody's touting this is the fastest way to do it,
Mm.
there's probably something wrong with it. In some cases, the easiest way is and the fastest way is the best. But oftentimes, trying to find the fastest way to do it can lead to the not best
Mm.
result. So carefully going at this for over a period of time. You're at home, you're in front of the TV, scraping that away, and cleaning it a little bit is going to yield the best result. I think personally.
Yeah, sure. Okay, to me, it's not entirely clear. If this was your table,
Yeah.
how would someone approach it then?
So what you kind of start with, it's great because we
So-
kind of have jumped around quite a lot.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you want to do is you want to figure out, firstly, like we did, if the coating itself is still solid underneath the grime layer. So in this
Mm.
case, we could see that there was some beautiful coating underneath and that this grime layer is just sitting on top. So you want to figure that out. In cases like this one, you might find that coating underneath has really done
Right.
something really awful, and that might need to be removed
Yeah.
potentially. If you have a look at that, you can see there's all the coating is essentially shrunk up into little bubbles over time.
And just looking at that, even most people would maybe come to that conclusion a little bit.
yeah,
Like some things you might try to clean and
yeah.
imagine that maybe, needs to
This
be
is
scraped.
something that almost you either leave it because you love the texture, which is also fine, or you kind of scrape it off. And again, I'd scrape it off because old finishes like this, old resin finishes, when they go bad, become very brittle. So they can be quite easy to just remove through physical force in terms of scraping. Can we get a close-up of just this area here? Because I'm going to use Luke's new scraper here and see if we can just get some of that off, which is the same idea as the credit card, but a little bit more aggressive because it's steel, and because I'm not trying to protect the coating underneath there. I'm just trying to get rid of this very brittle layer. I can get the bulk of that off really quickly with that.
Yep.
Looks attractive.
Yeah, it's working well. You're not scratching it at all, which
I'm
I
not.
probably assume you might run the risk of doing.
There's a little bit of risk of that. The nice thing about these scrapers is if you have a little bit of control and it takes a little practice, but because this is so brittle, this finish, it just comes off really easily. So I think the main lesson in that regard is to not treat everything the same. I think is really key, and not just look at every piece and go, I'll just do this one thing, but to look at it and think, do I want to get rid of it first? Do I need to get rid of that coating layer? Can I keep what's on there? Can I save that coating? Can I just clean it? Sugar soap is another potential cleaner.
It's pretty heavy duty.
Bit more aggressive, and it can cause metal things to corrode. So if you got metal drawer handles, make sure to remove all of those before doing anything.
And so that is have a particular base, as in a terpsy or metho type
This one's
base,
it's water based. It's got basically washing powder in it, so it's a washing salt sort of thing. So it's on the alkaline side of the pH scale, but that helps it clean a lot of things very well. But that's also why it can cause metals to corrode, essentially. So keep it away from handles and things like that.
Are people asking questions today?
No.
They're not. No. Are they allowed to ask questions today?
Of course,
They
please
are.
do, because I am kind of all over the place a little bit.
No, it's great. I just asked that question before, like, I'm not sure what I do with this table, just because I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
and I think-
if anyone else feels the same, let us know.
Let's step back a little bit and talk about that. So if this was your table, what would you notice first about it if it was you, if you found this on the side of the road?
Yeah, I would say it looks like it's got sort of dirty goo on it, and it's got lots of sort of stains and it's had some cup stains and look like a squarey type stain there.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of looks like it's a bit dirty, so I would probably try to wash it, I guess, first.
Yes, which is a great instinct. Definitely a really, really good. way to
But
go.
the fact that it's multiple layers of different things might not jump out at me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after a wash, being that might not come off that quickly, I would probably sand it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's very common.
Yeah.
Which is why it's nice. Which is why I wanted to talk about this. You may not go down the road of some of these things, and you may stick with sanding.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk with people about what the options are, so you can make that choice.
Yeah.
You can always try cleaning first. Cleaning is a really, really great place to start.
Yeah.
And a lot of pieces of furniture. Luke was telling me earlier today about a vinyl chair that you guys just cleaned up, and it just looked brand new from
Nice.
just a sugar soap clean, I think
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was.
But based on this patch, I would have much preferred not sanding it because that looks great and it still has the oldie charm,
Mm.
but it doesn't have all the goo.
Yeah, which for me is really important.
Yeah.
I fell in love with secondhand pieces and older pieces because of the charm that they have, because of the patina and the history that's on them.
Yeah.
I just love it. So I'd love to find. I like to find ways to keep that as much
Yeah.
as possible.
Could you say that a staged intervention process might be to wash and then to scrape with like something white
Yeah.
after that? If that
Yeah,
doesn't
if
work,
you always you want to go from your least aggressive to your most aggressive way of doing it. So even if you are thinking about sanding it back, you can try cleaning first. Clean the whole thing. If that doesn't work, you can maybe try something mechanical like scraping or something along that line. Like I did, you start with your soap first, and then you might go to your solvents as a second. Like you just kind of work down your options from least aggressive to most aggressive. And if none of those work, then you're on to potentially stripping the surface or
Yeah.
sanding the surface.
So stripping gets rid of oils, yeah?
Stripping is basically, it uses a very destructive solvent. Traditionally, paint stripper, I think that chemical is banned in a lot of countries now for home use, so be careful with that. There are some more natural options.
And
But
yeah, we
basically,
were
you're putting something on it that's going to destroy the oil.
we were using it in the shop a few months ago. We had plastic gloves on, and what was I stripping these old shutters?
Yeah.
And we tried this, whatever home DIY stripper, and then went to a more whatever industrial stripper. And the next day, my skin was all bubbling
Your skin.
from through the gloves because it was quite.
Did you
hardcore.
feel it burn?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's awful.
Yeah, and the plastic would melt, so that's a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, with those, because if you're using paint stripper, which is methylene chloride, it will dissolve a lot of types of gloves. So be very, very careful of that.
'Cause
Nitrile gloves are going to be the ones to use, NITRILE.
And I think there's two active ingredients in different paint strippers. I think there's a new one out that's got a different active ingredient which requires a different glove.
Yeah.
So that might affect it.
Yeah, the old one would be methylene chloride, which will eat through a lot of types of gloves, except for nitrile gloves.
Yeah.
And best to actually have the cloth ones that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
coated in nitrile. And that will burn. That stuff is awful.
Yeah.
It's not good for you to really breathe. It's not good for you to get on your skin. It's
Mm.
nasty stuff.
Mm,
The newer ones, I'm not sure what they use, to be honest.
right. Always scrape in the direction of the grain.
Yeah, that's a really key one as well. It's same with sanding. Is you've got a piece of wood here, it's got these kind of lines in it already that go that way.
Yeah.
And so if you're gonna sand it or you're gonna scrape it, you want to work in that same direction, because if you do scratch it, then it'll just blend in with all the other scratches that are grain
Yeah.
lines that are already on it. As soon as you go across the grain,
Yeah.
any scratch or scrape is going to become 1,000 times more noticeable.
Yeah. Even
Yeah.
with the stripper recently on a tabletop, I applied the stripper in some parts against the grain with the brush,
Yeah.
and even that showed up
Yeah.
later on.
And it's interesting, there's a couple of reasons for that. Sometimes those strippers can actually darken certain timbers. Old rosewood is famous for being darkened by paint stripper. And you can also end up leaving tiny little streaks of the original coating still on it, which again, if they're going with the grain direction, you don't notice it so much. Because if you're going across it, it's super, super
Yeah,
noticeable. And that's just going to make your life so much easier if you always work with the direction of the grain in everything you do, pretty much. Absolutely. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say next. I do want to mention, though, because we've talked a lot about this kind of surface coating and how we'd get rid of this grimy stuff. There are a few other common problems. You've got these kind of white stains. You've also got scratches and you've got chips in it as well, and dents and that sort of thing. And on this one, I think we've got a few scratches on the surface. That one's in the coating, so that one's we're just removing there. I mean, there's a few scratches in over here. Interestingly, actually, Luke, if you want to come over here, this one's really interesting because it's a scratch, but it's filled with a dark color, and it looks old. It looks like it's supposed to be there, sort of thing. This, and these, they're part of the patina of the piece. Whereas a newer scratch, say, I don't know if you can see these ones over here, or this here, Luke, actually, make you have to operate that camera. That one is new, and so it looks really upsetting to our eye. Whereas one really quick way to deal with that is actually to get something like a black wax in there, which will make it look like the other one, and then you've got a nice. It just makes it look old, and then it's added to the history of the piece as it goes. So, with your scratches, I think it's important to think about. First of all, a scratch is a loss of material, sort of thing. So you can't get rid of a loss of material. The scratch remover is nonsense. You can't remove a scratch unless you either bring the entire rest of the surface down to the bottom of the scratch, or you fill the scratch somehow. And those are the only two real options. When you sand the whole thing back, obviously you're bringing the whole surface down to the bottom of the scratch, which is one option, or you can fill it with something, or you can just color it in, so that it's not as noticeable anymore.
I was going to say, could you smear some dirt into it? So
Going back to the paint strippers, Terry Minotillo, I think I'm saying that
Terry.
right, saying there is some soya and citrus-based paint strippers which are safer to use. So that's another.
The soya one I've heard really, really good things about. I'm told that if you buy graffiti remover, it's usually the soya-based ones as well, because obviously you don't want to get any of the methylene chloride in the ground or anything outside. They're slower than the methylene chloride based or the more aggressive ones, but they still work. And one thing you can do as well, so if I wanted to strip this surface, something I could do is I could put that soy or citrus stripper on there and then cover it with something like a plastic. So that keeps that on the surface before it evaporates. So it keeps dissolving, it keeps sitting on there, breaking it up. And that'll help increase the amount of time it takes for it to completely remove that.
Yeah,
that's a good note.
do you want to go again?
Yeah, another comment. Mr. Andre Gulbis has
Andre
remarked
Gulbis.
that the camera work is outstanding, which is an astute observation.
Was that a question, Luke, or just
No,
a bit of?
remark.
Thanks, Andre. That's great.
Thanks.
For that table I was talking about with the sideways, applying it
stripper.
was a citrus stripper.
Was it?
And I was doing that in my lounge room at home, and it smelt great, which I thought was the most beneficial part of it. But also that if I was a bit stingy in my first application of the stripper, which meant that I had to do a second round, I found that if there were certain parts of the timber that was stripped, and the other parts didn't, I ran the risk of having the stripper on the bare timber, and then there was like discoloration and things.
Yeah. I think that's also another reason why sanding is usually the easier option, because you can sand and it's pretty straightforward. You keep sanding until it's all gone. The risk with sanding though is you can create hollows and stuff. But that's kind of, you want to be very even. When you start applying a stripper, you want to make sure that you get evenly over the whole area, that you're treating it evenly, and that you're getting back at it in the same amount of time. So if you've got a really large surface and it's going to take you 10 minutes to scrape it off, but 5 minutes to apply it, you might want to think about how you space out those segments so you can get it to it all in a reasonable amount of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. With
You just raise your hand.
With the
Ash over there.
with the sanding,
Yeah.
because if you had an orbital sander or those disc sanders, it makes it a lot easier. But obviously the orbital ones are a bit of a sort of circular type.
They
sanding
leave those little
versus
circular scratches.
Versus if you're just using your hand, you can sort of control a bit more.
I know that they've gotten better. The newer orbital sanders or the higher quality orbital sanders, one of the things that makes them better is they hide those. That kind of random orbital is supposed to create a randomized pattern so you don't get those kind of swirls in it. Following up with, like, if you do, say, 80 grit with your, don't do 80 grit, but you say you do like a coarse grit with your power sander, and then follow it up with the same grit by hand. You can help kind of blend in and move those remove those
It
scratches.
might have been one of you two taught me, unless I saw it online. With the orbitals, they're commonly misused, and if you, I think they've got like a red dot on them. But if you're not hitting the pad down, they're not actually spinning. So you want a reference point on the pad to ensure that it's spinning, because sometimes they kind of move it around that
Oh,
stuff's on
right.
the surface.
That wasn't me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Yeah.
Hmm.
excuse me.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, there you go. I'll take over from here.
Go for it. What's that?
No, that's fine. That's all I know.
Really good point though.
These are
with the
interesting.
sugar.
Stuff.
What's that? Do you want to move on to that?
No. If you got more to say on
Not
the,
really, because I think we're talking about cracks, so it's a good way to go. Because we did talk about coloring in some of the oil, and that's exactly what these are. These are
yeah.
colors. These are pigments.
Would,
Yeah.
would it be worth while you guys are chatting to maybe do a clean of that table?
Of this one.
Yeah, just to see how
Just
it
to
goes.
see how it
kind
goes.
of Just
Mm.
a bit of the experience while you guys are
Yeah. So this is a scraped patch, I guess.
just do a once over. It's the first step of your process, and just to see what will happen.
Yeah.
I'll try with the sugar soap in one area too. and see how
I
it
guess
goes.
it's interesting, depending on whatever furniture people are into at the moment. I got this lamp, I don't know, a month or two ago, and it had this hideous stain on it that I guess was trendy whenever in the 70s and I'd imagine a lot of people might want to be, depending on fashions or aesthetics, they might want to be actually stripping the furniture all the way back.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Stripping it back.
Yeah, based on
I mean that's
mistakes made in the past or...
part of the life of a piece of furniture. I think that, like I said, what I love about a piece of furniture is it has a life to it, has a history. And so, repainting it or doing something like that can help give it a new life.
So does that look like it's coming off? It looks nice when it's wet.
It have a feel of it.
Oh, yeah.
This is a really interesting one that we can't show you, but you feel how it's resistant.
Yeah.
That means that it's not entirely, that cleaner isn't entirely pulling it off, but
It's
it's
still
starting
good.
to. You're getting a little bit of a tack there.
Yeah, right.
So if you continued with this, you definitely get it there.
And so what is this you're putting on?
That's actually the sugar soap and water.
Sugar soap. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I just thought I'd try something different. We have
Pretty good. What else?
brushes, shoe brushes.
Shoe brushes.
Yeah,
are
you say
after.
they're off.
Sugar soap. So people usually, when they're cleaning their house after they have to move out, they use sugar soap on the walls to get the grime and dirt away.
Yeah. And it's the same. It's doing essentially the same thing. We've got a thick layer of grime and
It's
dirt.
like
from-
revealing new things,
from
like this
years.
bit here. Yeah, that's a. Okay.
And I find if I have to be really aggressive, a brush is really helpful as well.
So it's not too hard brush, yeah. It's like a.
No, this is
Shoe-
soft. It's a shoe polishy type brush,
Yeah. Okay.
and that can help.
Oh, look at that! It's coming off.
Mm.
That's working well.
That's good TV.
So would that be damaging the grain at all? Do you think?
I mean, if your brush bristles are really coarse, there's a chance I could be scratching it.
Seem like. Oh, look at that. So
Glorious.
would that be the original? Do you think? Or?
I think so. I think we won't really know until it dries,
Yeah.
but based on what I know about it, my guess is this area is definitely the original coating,
Yeah.
and this area here is just that grime that's coming off.
That's fine. But you have the risk of removing shellac with this stuff as well? Or?
Not so much. There is a slight risk of potentially removing the shellac because the alkaline in the sugar soap can be quite aggressive,
Okay.
but not as much as if I was to use an alcohol or if I was to sand or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
along that line.
So I don't know how many people would have sugar soaped their furniture before, but that looks...
The one thing that you have to make sure you do with your sugar soap is you have to rinse it off afterwards.
Yeah.
Because your sugar soap is that kind of, like I said, washing powder salt sort of situation. That's coming up nicely. There's still a little bit
Mm.
here. We might now be able to scrape some of this away and come back at it.
Yeah.
Because it's that salt situation. If you think about, you dissolve salt in water, right? And then the water, you leave it out and the water evaporates. You're still left with that salt in the bottom. It's a similar thing with this. If I put a lot of the sugar soap stuff on here
Yeah.
and let it dry naturally, that washing powder salt will be on the surface
Mm.
So then if you finished it later, you put another coat of shellac over top of it or something, or paint even,
It's still in there.
it's still in there and it'll potentially eat up through that coating that you add. So you have to rinse this off.
And so what is that? Just getting a wet rag and wiping it down? Or
Basically,
do you
yeah.
scrub it
Just
out
a little
again, or-
sponge or a wet rag and rinse it.
I have this vague memory in my head that someone told me when you use sugar soap, you didn't have to remove it.
Really?
So that was something alright.
Well,
In case anyone else has heard that. Very good. Look at that. So we could let that dry, I guess. And then see
definitely
what
let
it
that
looks
dry. And I can still see there's a few bits here that will require a little
Yeah,
bit more work. But man, I think that's a lot.
like. Yeah. Which camera are we on? The big one?
Yeah, we're on big one. Yeah.
Look at that. Shiny.
A bit further up. Keep going up. So it's just a bit there.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's. Oh yeah, put it all the way up.
Now hold it above your head.
Not that far. Maybe down a bit more. A little bit more. That's about right.
Yeah, nice.
Great.
Good one.
Do you have any more questions at this moment in time?
Cool. So you can do that on lots of different, all sorts of bits of timber.
I think cleaning is a great place to start. I think it yields beautiful results.
I was interested in the scratch. You said to fill it with a dark wax.
Mm-hmm.
What else could you fill a scratch with? Do you think anything?
I like waxes. I like hard waxes. I think they're really good. You can buy kind of putties and other fillers and that sort of thing. I tend to find a lot of them will be really brittle later and eventually come out.
Yeah.
I also just don't, if that's a personal preference, I don't like working with them as much. Whereas I find wax is a lot easier to work with. Yeah?
Terry Minotillo
Hi,
has
Terry.
made another comment. Once the surface has been degreased using a 0000 grade steel wool with the grain of the timber, together with the furniture oil, may clean the scum on the surface. A great furniture oil formulation is 50% paraffin oil plus 50% gum turpentine.
Yeah.
What would you have to say about
That suggestion? Yeah, that's pretty good. Steel wool, so that 000 grade steel wool Terry's talking about is this sort of stuff. It's really, really fine, and in some cases it's not actually steel. It's just a mild abrasive, like what we were doing with the brush, essentially. This does the same thing. It helps break up that greasy layer while the cleaner is doing its job. And the mineral, it's a mineral oil and terps as the cleaner. Is that what he said?
paraffin
She
oil
said?
and terps, yeah.
Yeah, paraffin oil and terps. Yeah, it's again that kind of solvent that's going to help soften up that greasy layer, much like the soap or the terps on its own.
I know what I was using now. I'm not sure what I was using it with, but it would, after you used it for a while, it was leaving some residue, like grey type residue,
Yeah.
staining some timber.
One of the reasons why steel wool is great and we use it a lot, but I am often hesitant to go for it first because if it is actually a fine steel, which I'm not sure this one is, but if it is actually a fine steel, you can end up with little bits of steel in the timber, which can cause the timber to darken if you don't remove them entirely, and it can leave little bits behind. That's true. If you're careful with it, you can get a really good result in actually working with a nice clean pad
Yeah.
where you don't have any of these frayed edges. You want to avoid that. If you work with that, it's a good little abrasive.
It's like a very fine sandpaper, would you say?
It's like a super, super fine sand. Closer to almost a green scrubby that you'd use on your dishes,
Oh, nice.
sort of thing.
And could you use one of them on a piece of furniture?
A green scrubby? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can see that that's coming up nicely.
Right.
So that's a great suggestion. You can see all the grease and grime that's sitting on top of that as well. But I do tend to be hesitant of them, and I find the brushes are nice because the brushes are, again, a step. There's no risk of leaving that steel in the timber. But yeah, great suggestion. And that mixture is it'll definitely work really well. And it's nice because it's not super aggressive. That mixture that's been recommended is not going to cause too much damage. So yeah, great addition.
Well
Yeah,
done.
good work, Terry.
Yeah, Terry should be here. Like standing
Yeah,
around.
well, get Terry there. I mean, we'll just listen. Yeah, do we want to talk about color though?
Yeah, I mean, I found it interesting.
Yeah, because you had an experience redoing a table.
Yeah. I did.
Want to talk about it?
I
wanna talk
recently refinished it. Yeah, do I want to talk about that? Refinished a table that some parts of it had been in the sun, particularly on the leafy extendable tables that lots of people have. certain leaves might be down the majority of their life, and then the ones that are up, they're copying a lot of sun. The ones that I had 2 leaves like this, and so the ones that were underneath, they weren't even exposed at all. It's not like they were hanging down. So they would have been underneath, depending on what the previous owners did, for 60 years or something, while the other 2 were sort of facing up.
Yeah.
Ours was like a 60s sort of mid-century table. So you got it out. The middle panel was quite dark,
Yeah.
and then the other ones had like a nicer colour,
Yeah.
but I couldn't. I had to sort of bring them to the darker colour,
Yeah.
even though they had that more tiki-looking sort of this type colour.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting, just mucking around with these different colours. I was only going to take a few of them, but there's a few different shades of brown here, and a black. Yeah, and then they're all sort of quite different.
You wanted to add some color into the paler pieces to get it to match the old one.
And I just did it fairly intuitively, but I'm not. I may or may not have done
So we can see what the colours are.
done it entirely correct.
Yeah. Well,
And I used a linseed oil, and I mixed the pigments
Yeah.
with some oil.
which I think it's worth talking about, because this is something that again seems intimidating. A lot of times, you've got a piece and you go, all right, I need to find a stain. This is an old mahogany piece, so I need to get a mahogany stain to patch these. And I think for little fills or color matching, stains are probably a little bit too difficult, and they're too particular. And I love building up from scratch, essentially, to build up to whatever color I want. So starting with these, which are pure pigments, essentially. So we've got pure burnt sienna, and that's just, if you want to get what you've got is a very, very fine powder, which is the basis of any paint or any stain that's out there. So paints initially, your oil paints, would have been this with linseed oil, exactly what you did,
Right.
essentially. So that's how traditional paints are made. You use your pigment, you get your oil, you grind them up enough, ideally that each little dust particle of color is completely surrounded in oil. And then you cover that on your surface, and that's how paints are made. In the term, and that's it. That's basically what you did. You made your own stain, you made your own paint, and you colored it in. And you were able to use the raw pigments to make sure that you got exactly the color you were working with. Same with an artist. They've got all these paints, and they're mixing it up together. You were just going a step further, because you also needed a certain level of transparency. You wouldn't necessarily want to just hit this with a paint, because obviously it'll be painted, which isn't what you want. So if you add the amount of this color that you need, just enough to give it that hint of color like a stain does, then you get the nice result. So starting with your pigments is great. Adding them to oil is good. You can add them into shellac, and you can use watercolors as well. One of the great ways that I like to say I've got a big patch here that I've got to color in is to actually do a thin coat of shellac, let it dry, do a thin watercolor over it to get closer to that color, let it dry, another coat of shellac to seal that watercolor in, let it dry, and then just kind of work my way up. And I think those two things have made coloring in or matching colors so much easier in my experience. One, by starting with the raw dyes and pigments myself and mixing up my own color that way. It A, means I can get a much better result, and it B, means that I know what I'm doing and I know what my color is. Like I can learn a lot more. Oh, that sienna's the one that gives me that, rather than being stuck with mahogany or cedar and not really knowing what they are or how they mix.
Right.
I think starting with raw color is good, and then not trying to get it all in one go. Not going, all right, I need to get it this color with one attempt. I can do a little bit, get a little closer, get a little closer, get a little closer.
Sealing it, and then applying another layer on top is interesting. So those two layers, they're not interacting with each other at all, because there's this sort of sealing layer in between.
If you did it with shellac and then your oil, and then your shellac and then your
That's
oil,
different again,
that would be potentially dangerous, because they dry differently over
Yeah.
time. You would really have to make sure they had dried completely. But the watercolor, because what a watercolor is it's really just either your pigment or your dye in water. When the water dries, you've just got the pigment or dye on the surface, and then you just seal that off afterwards. So there's nothing in the watercolor
Yeah.
that actually sits on the surface other than the pigment or dye itself.
And then same with the
So you
shellac.
just seal it in. And then, and then you just seal that in. So you basically, you're kind of just putting color on, sealing it in, putting a little more color on, sealing it in. And that's just such a nice way to do it. Want to mix them up?
Sure.
Let's do it. And I also want to talk in terms of that as well. This stuff here is called Van Dyke crystals. And these are great. This is a natural dye made from walnut crystals. And they are really, really good. Assume this is water. What?
Can you just get some more? That's it.
Yeah. So these walnut crystals, or Van Dyke crystals, mixed with water. It's a natural dye. That's
Yeah.
a water-based dye, much like our watercolor. And you can already see just with a little bit of water in there, it's starting to go brown. And it's just this really nice brown that's good for a lot of furniture things, coloring in. And you can, again, make this whatever color you want by adding or decreasing water, essentially. The more water, the thinner the color is. And this works really great for matching a lot of old pieces.
Right.
I'm about to just muck up this table that we're working on because I'm going to do some weird colors on it, but they'll be able to wash off pretty easily.
Right.
But you can kind of tone that in, and you can see what kind of color we get. We get that kind of brown, old mahogany color on that surface, which is quite nice. But that'll just wash off. Because it's just on there with water, I can kind of wash that away. It's which is the other nice thing about it, I can add that onto a coated surface. If you add that into raw timber, it'll really soak in. But if you put that coat of shellac on it, I can then put this brown on it. If it's not right, I can immediately wash it away. And if it is right, I let it dry and I seal it in with a coat of shellac and then work from there, which is just a nice, easy way of doing it if you've got the patience. Yeah.
Ms. O'Brien is asking, so would you oil it after all that sugar, soap and brushing? And I think that might be in reference to Terry's comment about his oil mix. But
Yeah.
also, when you are finished stripping and preparing the table, how would you finish it generally?
If I was in this case, you've got a nice...
You've got 5 minutes left.
If you've got a nice shellac coat underneath, what I would do is I'd clean away the grime, and I'd probably pull up the shellac coat by adding a bit more shellac to it in a polish, and then I would wax it. But probably the easiest thing to do once you clean it back is just to add a wax. A paste wax or beeswax is really good. I wouldn't put an oil over the top of it because, as I said early on, that's exactly what this might be. Oils will, especially the linseed oil, they'll harden on the surface, they'll become difficult to remove, and they can just go dark and gross over time. So in this instance, I often will clean it and wax it. And a clean and a wax is usually, I think, I'd say 90% of the time all you need to do. I know I went through like all these other really rambly things, but 90% of the time, clean it, bit of soap, or maybe a Terps mixture, and then do a wax afterwards. And you wax just like we did 2 weeks ago, essentially.
Oh, we did on the
We
wood.
did.
I remember that.
We did.
That now.
Remember that?
It's come back to me. I have a little tin of his Gillies wax, and it burnishes amazing, gets amazing shine.
Yeah, it's nice, and that's like that wax really brings out a beautiful shine.
Yeah.
Just earning my paycheck.
Beautiful camera work. Is this what Andre was commenting about? Good question though, Maz. Good to see you.
Very good. I had one other question. One more. A scratch in a floorboard.
Yeah.
You treat the same sort of way? Do you think? Smear some stuff into it.
Smear some stuff into it. I
What?
mean, that's the core of everything.
Yeah. I was wondering could you get a rock and scratch, like make some crumbs and make your own color.
Yeah.
With
Get a
something
rock.
outside. Some sandstone. I don't know.
For flooring. What kind of floor are we talking?
Like an ochre or something.
No, like just break it up
Just talking about
instead of buying a jar of this.
Things you find out.
Oh, right. Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, burnt sienna and umber are basically clays,
Yeah.
essentially. So that's where they come from.
And then I was going to say, could you get some dirt and smear the dirt into the crack?
I wouldn't recommend it.
You wouldn't?
No, not on a live program, but yeah.
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 Okay.
And there's a certain amount of times that you want a certain level of dustiness to be, so you can add dust to things.
Mm.
that's personal preference.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd probably put a wax or a coating on it before I did any of that.
Mm.
Any other questions before we finish up?
Yeah, I missed a few actually.
Good work. You're doing all that fancy camera work and you missed all the
Yeah.
comments coming in.
What are you working on?
Yeah,
now?
cool.
What do you mean we got 5 minutes? Oh, we do.
This isn't really a question again, but
I'm looking
Terry
at that
is chiming
clock,
in.
which is way off.
He's a TAFE teacher.
Oh,
for
nice.
furniture finishing.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
he's
that's
enjoying
great.
it.
Oh,
Very-
Terry, I've met Terry before.
Oh,
yeah.
Terry. Oh, Terry, mate. How are ya? Catherine Baker Curry asks, how even is the surface if you're layering colour patch repair? Do you use finish with polish and wax?
Colour
Sorry,
patch
say
repair.
that again.
How even is the surface if you're layering colour patch repair?
How even is it? Oh yeah, because you could potentially, if you put a thick shellac, you could end up building and getting drips. It's a really good point. It's as even as you make it, essentially. So just be thoughtful about that, because if we were layering in this, you could end up building that up quite thick, which would be dangerous.
Mm.
And then Mez O'Brien asks again, so if I drop something on my floor and left a dent, should I just get some clear wax and rub it in to fill it?
Depends how big the dent is, I guess.
That's a good, quick way to protect it, at least for the time being, until you potentially talk to a professional. It's actually really interesting, Terry, if you have, you want to jump in with a comment about the TAFE program and what they teach and why it's important, because I think it is important. We have these wonderful furniture finishing courses with TAFE in Australia, which train people how to do nice furniture work. And there's a reason it's a trade and a practice, is because it is valuable and it is worth going to people like Terry who are trained in that and talk to them about this stuff as well. So Terry, if you have any information about that course and that, check it in the comments for people to have a look at it, because I don't think a lot of people realize that there is a whole dedicated trade there.
Yeah.
Whole craft.
I have a question about the ding in the floorboards. The other day working in here, I was clamping a chair together and I put some little bruises in the where I was clamping.
Mm-hmm.
Made a mistake. And so I got an iron out to see if some of the steam could maybe make the ding come back out again.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the time, I think it also mucked with the finish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got some sort of white patching like that. Yes, what about those ideas? If it was a ding, could you apply heat? And
Yeah, and
But
the thing
are
is,
you-
so
are
with
you-
with a dent in timber, you have
Mm.
crushed timber fibers,
Mm.
and so if you get heat and moisture in there, they can expand out again to flat. But obviously, like with this, as you said, that heat and
Yeah.
moisture can cause a white spot. So there's a balance there, and there's a
balance.
care.
Yeah.
If you are going to steam that wood, then you are running that risk.
Yeah.
In which case, maybe you'll have to do some more work afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are actually quite a few videos and resources out there for reading about dealing with white stains and what. But do be careful, because there's a lot of quick tips that go around that I would be wary of. I've heard a lot, for instance, about putting mayonnaise on a piece to clean it and get rid of stains. And don't
you lick
don't
it
put
off?
mayonnaise.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, do I?
Don't do it. I know specifically of a piece where somebody did that, and it made the whole thing look like this.
Mayonnaise.
Essentially, yeah.
Interesting. And don't put the iron on the timber, just in case
Directly,
you try
yeah.
that.
Put a soft cloth between that as well. Yeah.
We're about out of time.
Yeah.
So this is one more comment from Mez O'Brien. I think it's sort of important to share. Loving the video quality. Good job.
Wow, that's great. Thanks, Mez.
Do you have any more self-aggrandizing things that you want to say over there, Luke?
Do a star wipe while you're at it. Do a star wipe. Throw in some more cinematography, whatever. Here we go. And some sound effects as well.
Very professional.
That was great. It's
That was
nice
fun.
to
I
see.
feel like that was a little bit all over, so if you have any questions, please send them through. We can continue discussing these kind of things going forward.
Yeah.
And enjoy.
Right. I had an idea about a 1 hour live stream.
Yeah.
That being that the bow is all about collecting things and reusing things. I don't know if you've been watching MasterChef. It's just finished, I think.
don't watch MasterChef.
I've watched a little bit of it. And so when they have a challenge at the end of the week,
Yeah.
they all have to race each other. Maybe not race. They have like a challenge for who can cook the best meal.
Right.
So I thought that maybe we could, two of us have to pick something up off the street, and then we use the two cameras in like a 1 hour fix up challenge.
This goes against everything I believe in.
No, but it's more less about finishing, but more about fun and restoring and recycling.
I do like that. But I am definitely I'm always like
Oh.
the speedy way to do it. Makes
Okay, I'll
me
talk to
sad.
Luke. Maybe Luke and I can do that.
Luke would have fun with
Anyway,
that.
that was great, Shane.
Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah.
We have next week should be clothing again, which is going to be a lot of fun. Clothing repair, darning, knitting sort of stuff, I think was what we talked about, which is going to be a lot of fun. And if you have any specific projects that you want direct advice on, do book in for a one-on-one consultation on our website, bauer.org.au. Check that out and book in, and we can do a one-on-one video chat for 15 minutes and talk about your piece specifically. Thank you very much. Any final comments? No? Sweet.
Oh, show us the finished tabletop next time.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah,
Sure
we'll
do.
do. On the Instagram for sure.
Yeah, it'll go up. Sweet.
All right.
You have to